When you think of Saudi Arabia, what comes to mind? Probably oil, right? And just immense wealth. But there's another side to that story, a really stark reality. This is a nation defined by a lack of water. So today, we're going to dive into one of the most insane engineering projects on the planet, a project that's all about building a future that isn't just about oil.
I mean, we're talking about a kingdom where 98% of the land is just scorching desert. And get this, it's the largest country in the entire world without a single natural river. Not one.
And yet, right in the middle of all that sand, Saudi Arabia is, well, they're building their own rivers. We're talking about a massive underground network of pipelines that stretches for an absolutely astonishing 12,000 kilometers. It just seems to defy logic, right? So you have to ask, in a country like this, where is all this water even coming from? That's the big question, and that's exactly what we're going to figure out in this explainer.
Okay, so to really get your head around the solution, you first have to understand just how massive the problem is.
You know, there's this quote that just perfectly sums up the whole situation. It really nails the paradox, doesn't it? Saudi Arabia has this unimaginable wealth, but it's missing the one thing you need for, well, for life. And these factors, they just pile on top of each other. So for starters, its capital, Riyadh, gets barely any rain. We're talking just a tiny amount. And at the same time, the population has just exploded, from only 3 million people back in 1950 to over 26 million today. That has put a crazy, almost unbearable strain on the country's water. For decades, the kingdom actually had a solution, but it was a ticking time bomb, a temporary fix with some pretty devastating long-term consequences. And yeah, this is kind of where a pattern starts, solving one problem but creating another. They started tapping into something called fossil water. So what is that? Well, it's ancient water that's been trapped deep underground in aquifers for millions of years. The key thing to remember is that it's a finite resource. It's non-renewable. Once it's gone, it's not coming back for thousands, if not millions of years. So, back in the 1970s, the government had this big idea. They wanted to be self-sufficient in food. So they launched this huge initiative to grow their own wheat in the desert. And you know what? The plan worked. But it came at a catastrophic cost to their water supply. And you can see the impact right here. By 2003, a whopping 85% of the country's water was being poured into agriculture. It got so bad that NASA satellites later confirmed the kingdom was draining its ancient aquifers at a rate of 2 trillion liters every single year. Just an unbelievable amount. They were literally draining their only natural water source dry. So the government finally realized, okay, this is completely unsustainable. They shut down the wheat program and basically put the remaining fossil water in lockdown, for emergencies only. But of course, that put them right back at square one. And this is where the story starts to sound like something out of science fiction. With their main water source now off limits, they launched a project that is just truly mind-blowing. An artificial underground river. This thing is absolutely essential for powering their futuristic cities and their big economic plans. Okay, let's talk scale. The total length of this network of pipes is 12,000 kilometers. Let that sink in. 12,000 kilometers! That is long enough to stretch from Los Angeles to Tokyo and almost all the way back again. It's just insane. And the volume? Just as nuts. Every single day, this system is designed to move 9.4 million cubic meters of fresh water across the country. That is enough to fill almost 4,000 Olympic-sized swimming pools. Every single day. But, pushing that much water, often uphill into mountainous regions, well, that takes an incredible amount of power. The pumping stations for this network alone eat up 9% of Saudi Arabia's total electricity. It's like they're literally making rivers flow backwards, from the sea up into the mountains. So if they're not using that fossil water anymore, where is this all coming from? Well, the answer lies in the sea. This entire massive project is fed by what is now the largest desalination operation on Earth. Saudi Arabia has built 28 huge plants along its coasts, and their whole job is to turn salt water into fresh, drinkable water. And they do this using two really incredible technologies. The first one is called multi-stage distillation. The easiest way to think about it is like boiling a giant kettle of seawater. They capture the steam, which is pure fresh water, and all the salt gets left behind. Then you've got reverse osmosis, which is even more advanced.
It uses just immense pressure to force seawater through a filter that is so unbelievably fine that it literally squeezes the water molecules out, leaving 99% of the salt and all the other junk behind.
So, okay, this technological marvel, it solves the freshwater problem. But in doing so, it creates a completely new and really serious environmental one. And here we go again, right? Solving one problem by creating another.
So, what's the dark side of this so-called miracle? I mean, what happens to all that salt that gets filtered out? It doesn't just vanish into thin air. It becomes this highly concentrated, pretty toxic waste product.
And the desalination process produces a monumental amount of this waste. We are talking about 329,000 tons of it.
Every single day. This waste is a super salty, concentrated gunk called brine. And all of it, every last drop, gets pumped directly back into the sea. This raises the water's temperature, makes it way saltier, and creates these huge dead zones where marine life just can't survive anymore. And to try and put that number into perspective, 329,000 tons, that is like dumping the weight of more than 1,600 blue whales, the heaviest animal on the planet, into the ocean every 24 hours. The sheer scale of this new problem is just, it's hard to even wrap your head around. So, this brings us to the final and maybe most crucial part of the story. Faced with this enormous environmental mess, the kingdom is now forced to innovate again. So, what's next? Well, they are working on it. One idea is to use these deep-sea diffusers to spread the brine out over a much wider area, trying to dilute its impact. But there's an even cooler idea on the table called brine mining. This is where they develop tech to actually pull valuable minerals like magnesium and potassium right out of the waste. Just imagine that for a second. A future where the pollution from making fresh water actually becomes a valuable resource for industry.
You know, the story of Saudi Arabia's artificial river is it's a powerful lesson in human ingenuity. It shows that we can probably engineer our way out of almost any problem. But it also forces us to ask a really deep question. In our quest to conquer scarcity, are we actually solving our problems? Or are we just transforming them? Trading one crisis for the next in some kind of endless cycle? That's a question we're all going to have to answer as we figure out how to build the future of our planet.